Hello, my name is Steve Aldrich and I'm going to show you in this video how to use Visual Basic Script with Bartender software. On the screen you can see a label which goes on a box of apples. It shows us the name of the apple, a UPC code, a QR code. Down here is called the G10 barcode, and a couple of other fields representing the size and quality of the apples. And here we have the month and day that the apples were packed. And here we have a region which represents what's called the traceability code. And it has CG, which represents our warehouse. And then in this space, there's going to be something called the lot number, which represents a farmer's lot, the specific place where those apples were grown in the orchard. And here is the date that the apples were packed. There's also a date here. You'll see 25/02/10. That means 2025, February 10th. And here, 25/041. This is year 25 plus the Julian date, 041, which would be the 41st day of the year. That would mean February 10th, because there's 31 days in January plus 10 more for day 41 on February 10th. Here's the data entry form. You can see that I have a drop-down list, place to put in the product code, something we call the run number, and here's the lot number. You're going to see that in just a moment. So I'm going to start to print the form. Press Control P. And in this case, I'm only going to print preview. My form appears and it's live. I can make entries and these values will flow into the actual label. So I'm going to use lot Q for my lot number, and I'm going to choose February 10th as the date, and I'll select the other values as well. As soon as I click Next, those values flow into the finished label. Here's the pack date, February 10th, the date that I chose. Here's my traceability string, and you'll see that lot Q is right here to the left of the date. This date is in month, day, year form. Here's the date again. Here's a 25 and then 041. That's the Julian date. February 10th is the 41st day of the year. 31 days in January plus 10 more makes Julian date of 41. And here we have that date again, year, month, day form. 25 for 2025, 02 for February, and 10 for February the 10th. So with one click on my date picker, I've been able to display the date in 4 different formats. I'm going to show how the label is created with a simplified version now. I only have 2 fields here. This is the traceability date, and that's the name of it, the traceability date full text. And the name of this data object is traceability date object. It's a named data source. The other one is also a named data source, and I'm calling it the CG lot number text. And here is my data entry form. I'll start to print the label with Control P, and my data entry form pops into view. And in this case, I'm going to choose January 10th for the date. And I'll use lot number XY, XZYA. XZYA is my lot. And now you can see here it says CG XZYA 01/10/25. And so the 01 is for January 10th, 2025. And there's my lot number, which is what I want. And prepended to XYZ are the letters CG. And I want those letters CG there. So the question is, how did I get them there? If we look at the data source for the CG and we look at the transform, you'll notice that here under VB script, I've selected use VB scripting. And so this is my first example of a VB script. I entered lot Q or XYZA in my form, but when it was displayed, it had the CG prepended to it. And if you see right here, you can see that value is assigned a new value, which is, quote, CG ampersand value. Ampersand means concatenation in Visual Basic. So what we're saying is take a value and replace it with CG followed by whatever the value used to be. And what is the value? Well, it's the value of the CG lot number object itself. So this value means CG lot number object's value at the time that this piece of script code ran. And if you look over here on the left, this tells us when this code runs. It runs at the time of the on-process data event. And you can tell because there's a yellow lightning bolt here. And that means that this procedure is turned on. So when we enter the data from the form, after I click my final OK button here, after I've entered all of my data, these values will flow into the label, and then that Visual Basic script will get fired off and run. Now I have added a new data source to my label. It's a text box, and the name of it is Julian Date Display Object. When I start to print the label, the first thing that happens is a message box appears which says, on print job start event, just fired. How did this happen and why? If we go over here to the Edit menu item and open up the Visual Basic Script Editor, here on the left you can see that there are a number of events that trigger the Visual Basic scripts. And we've already talked about the one with the lightning bolt here, which was our first one-line script related to CG lot number object. Here on print job start, you'll notice that the code that executes when this event, print job start, occurs, this code is executed. And that is to display a message box which reads, on print job start event just fired. There's another event that you can see right here, which is on new record. Now, when we start to print the label, the first event is on print job start. After you have clicked all of your radio buttons and clicked your choices in your drop-down lists and so on, and the data is ready to flow into the label, the on new record event will occur. When this event is triggered, the code that's right here will be run from the top down. Everything here below line 5 is a comment, and I'll be running this code soon. But in the meantime, the first thing that happens is I declare a variable called X. And in VB script, all variables are of type variant, which means it can be a string, it can be an integer, it can be a floating point, it can be a date. A variant can be anything you want, including an array. And what I'm doing is I'm assigning X to be equal to the value of traceability date object. This is our date, which is in month, day, year, order. And you can see right over here, the script assistant lets you see all the different named data sources. And if you double click one of these items over here on Script Assistant, it will put that string in your code. And what this means to the computer is go out to the Julian date display object and get what's there. Well, in this case, after I go out to the traceability date object and get what's there, the value, I'm storing it into a value called X. Now I'm declaring another variable, which is Julian date, and now I'm saying that Julian date is going to be assigned the value of my Joule date, where my Joule date is a function written in VB script, and I'm passing the traceability date object into that function. So now I'm going to go over here to where it says procedures for all events, and you'll notice right here at the top is my Joule date function. It starts with function and it ends with end function. And a function takes some data in this case, the incoming data is called date in, and the function returns some value when it's finished. And that's the last line right here. It says that my Joule date is equal to Joule date. The name of the function is used to represent what gets passed out of the function after it has been executed. So the date comes in, and it's in month, day, year order. So it's coming in as, let's say, February 10th, 2025. It'll come in as 02/01/25. Now I declare some more variables: Joule date, month number, day num, year num, and a temporary variable that isn't strictly necessary, but you'll see that in just a moment. And then a variable which is called Feb days. So the date in, this is the date that comes into my function like this: February 10th, 25. This is the incoming date. 02/10/25 is what is passed into me. When I call the left function using date in, 2, that means take this date and give me the first 2 digits that are on the left. So that's going to be 02. Then I say that temp is equal to the results of the call write date in 4. So if my date is 02/10/25, the 4 rightmost digits are 1024. So that's what's going to come back from calling write date in, 4. I will get a 4-digit value, and it's going to be 1024. Now for my day number, I'm looking for the part that says 10. So I take that temp, which is 1025, and I'm now going to get the left 2 digits of that value, and so day num will hold the value 10. So I have effectively lopped off or extracted the day number, and the year is the 2 digits on the right. So if the incoming date is 02/10/25, these last 2 digits are 25. So if I take the right 2 digits from the date in, I will get year number equals 25. Now, what do I do with this? The first thing I do is I check to see if the year is a leap year. So I use the mod operator. This is modulus, which means the remainder after division. So 15 divided by 3 is 5, remainder 0. So 15 mod 3 is 0. 16 mod 3, however, is not 0 because 3 goes into 16 5 times, remainder 1. So 16 mod 3 is 1. So any number that is divisible by 4 will be, that number mod 4 will be 0. So if the date is 2020, then 20 mod 4 is going to be 0 because 20 divided by 4 is exactly 5 with no remainder. On the other hand, 2025 divided by 4 will not give you mod 0. So if it is a mod 0, it's a leap year, and I will say that February days equals 29. In all other cases, February days equals 28. Now, here's where I figure out the Julian date. If it's January, I start with 0. If it's February, I'm going to start with 31 plus the day in February. If it's March, I'm going to start with 31 plus the number of days in February plus the day of that month. And so in every one of these cases, the base number for Julian is increasing. And I'm saying, look at the month number. If it's 1, do what's here in case 1. If the month number is 2, execute what's here in case 2. If the month number is 3, run this code and all the way down to case 12. If it's December, I'm going to say that the Julian date is 31 plus Feb days plus 31 plus 31 plus 31. Obviously, I could add all these up and just use constants, but I want you to be able to see how I figured out what my base date is. Then at the end, I say the Julian date is equal to the previous value of Julian date plus the day num. And now this Julian date is ready to be returned to the caller. But in my display of the Julian date, I want 3 characters. So I'm checking the length of that Jul date right here, and I'm saying if the length of this string is only 1 character, add 2 zeros and then append the Julian date. If there are 2 characters in the Julian date, like 88 or 91, then add a 0 to that. So it's now 091. And in the case of 3, we do nothing. We just, if the date is past 100, you just return it exactly the way it is. So when I say my Jul date equals Jul date, this is what is returned to the caller, and it is the day number or the Julian date. So when we look at this code here, Julian date will get defined to be the result of that call. Now I want that to appear on my label. So I double click over here where it says Julian date display object dot value equals Jul date. Now I'm going to save that. Now I'm going to print my label. Here's my date picker, and I'm just going to pick, March 1st, because the Julian date for March 1st will be 60. 31 days in January, 28 days in February, for a total of 59, plus 1 day in March for a total of 60. And I'm going to say that my lot number is XZYA. XZYA. And look, there's my traceability label CG, which was prepended to the XCYA, added to that March 1st, 25 date. And look what's here in the Julian date display box. Sure enough, it is the number 60. So using that one date, I was able to write more than one function. I wrote a function which extracted from the date in the month, the day, the year, and then I reorganized it in this order: year, month, day. And then in my code here, I said, look here on line 8, I said, the pack date object, that's where I wanted the date in year, month, day order. I said that it was equal to the result of the call to year, month, day, where X was passed in month, day, year format, and then it returned in year, month, day format, and then it was assigned to this value. Here's the complete label once again, and I'm using that date in several places. Right here, I'm displaying the month and the day. Here it is, as it came from the date picker in month, day, year form. There's a reference to the Julian date hidden in this QR code. And here, where it shows 041, that's a use of the Julian date. And here, where it shows 250210, that is the use of the format in year, month, day form. So here's my Julian date function. I also wrote a function which converts that date into year, month, day form. Here's the month, day function where I take the month number and I convert it into May, September, and so on. And you saw that where it said Feb 10. And then the place where I just showed the year with 25, here I just extracted the right two characters of the year number and returned that as year num, which in this case was 25. So there's the use of the year num. There's the use of the Julian date. A Julian date is also assigned in here. And those are the different ways that I wrote functions in the Visual Basic Script Editor to get the data in my label the way I wanted it. Here's the very first function that we used. Not really a function, it was just a single line of code. We took the value that was captured in the lot number data form entry box and prepended a CG to that. And we did that at the time that the data on process data event was fired off. Then all of the other functions, which you can see here, these functions were all run one after another at the time of the on new record event, which occurs after all of the drop-down boxes and radio buttons have been clicked and you've said, okay, I'm ready to go, let's print the label. And all of those different functions are stored here in this library of functions under Procedures for All Events. That concludes my explanation of how to use Visual Basic Scripting with Bartender software.